Welcome everybody to your first lesson on 3D game design with the Godot engine. We're going to start right at the beginning here. I know some people have perhaps worked with the 2D in their previous classes with Godot. We're going to kind of start off because we've got a lot of new people here, and we're also just to refresh your brain. And this year we're going to dive into some 3D work. We're working with the Godot game engine, so that's one first thing you're going to have to download. We have not got them installed on the school computers because, for a couple reasons. One, Godot runs just by itself, so it's fabulous. You can just download it, take it with you, pop it on a USB or whatever you want. And it's very actively developed. So that means there's constantly new releases as they're fixing bugs and adding new features to improve it. So it's a whole lot easier if you just download the latest version. And it's also super light and lean. It is a great development environment, very similar to a program you may have heard called Unity, which is used for a lot of big commercial games. Godot is starting to get there as well. And one of the nice things about Godot is it is totally free. And you can make some really professional, amazing looking games with it. All a game development environment or a game engine is for is to just make the programming a whole lot easier for you. It puts together a whole set of tools that you need in order to program your game easily. It's not going to make the game for you. It's just going to kind of give you that leg up to be able to do some really common things very quickly. For instance, you're going to want to draw things on the screen. You're going to want to have a player that moves around. You're going to want to have things that bump into each other. You're going to want to render 3D models and things like that. And that involves a ton of programming. So this takes care of some of those really common things for you. The first thing you're going to need to do is to download this Godot game engine, and you're going to be working with the standard version on our computers. They are 64-bit machines, so make sure you download this one. The mono version down here you see is if you have some familiarity with the C# programming language. This comes from is very popular in a lot of Apple development and in Unity. So this is kind of help people to move between languages. But we're going to be using the standard version because the native programming language called GD script is really, really, really similar to Python. So it's going to look really familiar to you. So you just click this one and download it. And you're going to see it comes down pretty quickly here. And I've got the latest version. It is zipped up. So I'm just going to right click show in folder and bring this over here. Very easily, just extract all. And it's going to ask you where to put this. On your computers here, I would recommend you just put it right into your H drive here. This will be a nice easy spot to be able to access it. So I just click select folder and hit extract. And you're going to find it pretty quickly unpacks and is a very nice light program. I think it's only about 30 megs. So you'll find that it comes down pretty quickly. And now I can see right here, I've got the latest Godot on my H drive ready to go. So let's open it up without further ado. There's a couple things you need to do before we actually dive into making the game. It's going to give you a warning. Yes, we do want to run this program. The first thing that pops up here says you don't have any current projects. That is totally fine. I'm just going to, I don't want to look at any of the examples. We're going to build our own. So I'm just going to hit cancel here. And on your project manager, this is where all of your projects that you're currently working on are going to pop up. If you have an existing one, you can import it. But for us, I want to make a new project. And I'm going to call this my 3D test game. Oh, let's do that properly. 3D test game. And one key thing here, please everybody watch, is where you're going to save this. It's a bit of a weird spot on our school computers. So instead of going here, we actually have to save the project before we even start working on it. We create a space where we're going to put all of these things. So you need to hit browse here. And the tricky part is that we don't want to save it onto our computer. You want to save it into your folder. That means you don't have to use the same computer every time. So under path here, make sure you choose that H drive. That is your folder that follows you around whenever you log in. And then you're probably going to want to create a folder for this thing. It has to be an empty folder because it's going to take over the whole folder. So I'm going to create in my documents here, I think I already have a folder called Godot projects. I do indeed. And I am just going to make a new folder for us here. I will call this 2022. And I'm going to select the current folder for my project. So it's going to be called 3D Test Game. It is in this folder. There's two little things here we want right now for our OpenGL ES3. We want to use this one. Better visuals, other stuff. If you're going to make games for older computers or for the web games, I'm going to suggest you move over here. But for us, to be perfectly honest, our 3D games are going to really be slow on the web unless we do a ton of optimization. So we're going to play around with just making it look great on our computers for now. We can always change it later, as you see here. So I'm just going to hit create, and up will come Godot in a second. There we go. Here is our 3D world and our 3D environment. To give you a quick little tour for people who are brand new to Godot. It looks a little bit intimidating with all these different options and menus and things like that, but don't worry, we'll ignore what we don't need at the beginning and just focus on what we do need. In the middle here is kind of your design place. This you can change between 2D, 3D, the programming or scripting area here, and then a place called Asset Library, which is where people share stuff that they've made that can help your game even more. For us, we're going to stick with the 3D right now. And you'll see this kind of 3D axes here that you can get used to and work with. Now, if you've never done any 3D before, this can be a little bit of a learning curve, but don't worry, we'll keep you along here. You can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out, and if you click and hold your mouse wheel, you can see you can actually spin and rotate around and look at your world here in a 3D kind of view. This is pretty handy there. But basically, all of your game is going to be built here and moved and positioned around. On the left, we've got a menu here where we create what are called nodes. Now, essentially, the game engine here works with building all these different nodes. Nodes are essentially all the different pieces and bits of your game. And if you want to think about it from your previous programming, a node is a little bit like a function that does a whole bunch of things on its own. And the power of them is that you can add nodes onto other nodes, so you can build them kind of like a Lego or a Mr. Potato Head almost structure. You can add features and take them away. But think of them as kind of chunks of code that have a job. So in their own way, they're a lot like functions. They work independently, and then we can put them together to create even more awesome things. Down here is your little file explorer. So this is where all of the stuff that is part of your game is going to be. So you're going to take a bunch of nodes and put them together and perhaps create like a player, and then you'll save that player as a file, and it'll pop down here. Or maybe you're going to bring in some music or graphics or a video, or everything is going to appear down here. And really all this is just mirrors the folder that we've created. And if I go into my documents here, we can roll down to the Godot projects, and I did 2022. There it is there. And you'll see actually there's a couple things, a couple hidden ones here, but you can see there's the default environment, there's that default environment folder, and there's an icon folder that automatically gives us this little Godot picture, and there's that icon picture right there. There's also some hidden folders that don't appear here, but we won't worry about those for right now. And as you add new things either to here or here, you'll see they mirror each other. Sorry about that. On the right-hand side, this is where you're going to kind of change and customize a lot of the properties of each of your nodes that you're going to add. And just remember, a node is like a function, and they've kind of pre-built a bunch of them for you for really common type things that you'll want to add to your game, and we'll look at that in a second. Also over here, you're going to change some more properties. So over here, really, you're going to basically create the nodes here, add them into your game scene, and then customize some of the properties there, as well as add some scripts to them to really create your game. So let's start right away. Now, every every file or everything is based on what's called a scene. So you can see right now we're on an empty scene. This is my first thing. And think of a scene as kind of like a collection of nodes. And that could be either, a scene could be a level for like level 1, level 2, level 3, or a scene could even be like the player, because the player is going to be a pretty complex thing. We always need to start off with a root node, or kind of what the basis of my scene is. In this case, I'm going to just create a level, and the root node is going to be a 3D scene. Notice we can make 2D games as well, but we did that last year. So we're going to work with our 3D scenes. Some of the basic ones are also a user interface. This is handy for things like your starting screen or level, and then there's a whole pile of other nodes hidden down here, which we'll get to in a minute. But in this case, our root node is going to be a 3D scene. And you will see away goes that little menu here, and we've got our first node. It's also called a spatial node. And really, it is, you can see just these axes. In fact, it has no space or dimension. You don't see it. It's just an idea, and it's kind of like a container for the entire level. So I've got that there. Now, spatial node is a terrible name, so I'm going to call this, give a better name, let's call it level 1. Now, in your naming, you should always stick with some kind of naming rule that you're going to use for naming all of your things. And it could be, generally we want to avoid spaces. That is great for any kind of object names or variable names or things like that. Now, some people like to use capital letters and smaller letters. For me, I prefer to make all of my things lowercase, so that's how I'm going to go. But if you had like multiple levels, like level 1, you might want to have something like this, and you do this thing called camel casing, but that is up to you. I'm not particular about what your rule is, as long as you pick a rule and you stick to it. And that you name everything. Don't leave a bunch of things unnamed there. So level 1 now is pretty boring. There's no real anything going on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some more nodes to create functionality in our game, to build something. What I'd like to do is to create something where I can actually play a game on, and a spatial node, or this level 3, is really just a container, right? I've really got this empty giant plane here with really nothing. If I ran the game, I would see absolutely nothing. So I'm going to have kind of like a tabletop where I can play this game. So to my level 1, I am going to add a new node with this little plus up here. And you can see that we've got the 3 basic ones up top there, but there's all these different ones. In fact, there's whole menus upon menus of different nodes here. Notice we got a whole section for 2D ones, and I've got a whole section for 3D ones. All the 3D ones are in this red color. 2D ones are all blue, and then our user interface nodes are all in green. Things like titles or drop-down lists, or even video players and things like that. So I am going to add a node that is going to be my tabletop, and it's just going to sit there essentially. So I can either go and try and find it, and they're all buried under a whole bunch of different menus, or very nicely, I can just type this search here. And the tabletop, what I want to create, is just going to be a body, a thing that's going to sit there. So it doesn't move. So we have a special kind of node called a static body. And it's part of what we call physics bodies, things that interact in a realistic way. So the nice thing is Godot, the people who have made it, have kind of created some properties and this object. So it does like it does what it gives us the basis for what we want to do. It creates a physics body, something that is able to interact with other objects that we're going to put in. And this one is designed not to move, so it's just going to sit there. So that means it's not affected by gravity. We're not supposed to be able to move it around or do anything like that. It's just going to act like, say, a wall or a floor, or in this case, the tabletop. So I'm going to create a static body. And you'll see if I zoom in here, now I've got this, this little squarey type thing. It's still not actually there. And you see I get a little warning beside this here, which says a node configuration warning. If you did 2D Godot, you'll remember this popped up all the time whenever you created something. And we look at the warning, we say it has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. And remember, I mentioned that we can add nodes onto nodes onto nodes. It's kind of like adding puzzle pieces, or that Mr. Potato Head model I like is you add an eye and a mouth, and you add different things to this. But before I do that, I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this floor, sticking with my model. Now, the idea of the static body is that it knows and it allows things to be solid and to not move around, but we need to add a couple other features. First of all, it doesn't know what shape it is. Or how big it is. So it says consider adding a collision shape or a collision polygon, which we'll do in a second, but the shape is actually also an invisible. It's kind of like a hitbox, if you will. So I find it way easier to actually give the appearance of something so I can see it, and then I know how big and what shape it's going to be. So to the floor, I am going to add another node. And in this case, it's going to be called a mesh instance. There we go. Not the CG mesh, but the mesh instance here. And again, if you've done this before, if you've worked with the 2D, this is the point where we would have added, say, a sprite or a picture of the thing that we wanted to have. However, because we're working in 3D at the moment, it's not just a picture. We actually have to have a 3D object, and 3D objects are often built out of what are called meshes, essentially a whole bunch of kind of points with lines between them. So, and there are some built-in ones in Godot we can use, kind of basic shapes, or you could go on the internet and find or design your own 3D model that you could bring into this game. In this case, I'm just going to put a mesh instance in, and you'll see nothing really appears. But you may also remember, if you worked with it last year, is we've got a container for a mesh, and then we have to say what kind of mesh it was. In this case, when it was a sprite that we put in the 2D world, we drag our graphic up here. In this case, however, we get to pick some of the basic meshes that are available to us, and they're really just basic geometric shapes, like a cube or a sphere, pyramids, even this little capsule, which is common for a lot of things. In this case, I'm doing a floor, so I would like, and a plane you might be tempted to use, but I think they're going to actually get rid of that from Godot because it has no height, and I would like a little bit of height to my tabletop. So I'm going to add a cube mesh here to it. And if I zoom out now, you can see we actually get this cube. Now, we still have that warning, and I might want to make this cube a little bit different, different size. So I want you to note how we can tweak this and change it a little bit in the 3D world. And again, if you've done any 3D modeling, you'll be familiar with this kind of idea, but you'll notice we've got all these little arrows around here. So these actually allow us to change and customize this shape. So some of them are moving. So you can see with the little arrows, I can pick up and move my model. Now I'm going to hit Control Z to make sure, because right now it's right in the middle of my scene, and I like that there. So I want to make sure I don't move it around too much. I'm going to go Control Z there. We also have a rotate one. See that little arrow around there? You can rotate. Or these little So that's my moving as well. I want to scale it, and in general, could probably do that down here. There we go. We can either do it manually like that, and you can see the numbers are changing, or in this case, we can also make it do it via numbers. So this is a pretty small little box that I want. I would like this to be a lot bigger for my game. So I'm going to scale and change it in the, so notice this is the X direction, and actually you can see those up here. Like a lot like your X and Y when you're doing your mathematics. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to make it 10 in the X direction, and you can see it gets a lot bigger there. And I'm going to make it 10 in the Z direction, and just hit enter. And you can see now I've got this kind of platform that I could work with. It is 1 high, it is 10 wide, and it is 10 deep. And that is going to be my work surface, my game surface for now. I could make it a little bit bigger later on if I like, but let's work with that now. Notice we still have this error, which is it has no shape, even though I obviously given it a shape. Oops, undo that. Just because we can see it doesn't mean there's actual any physical boundaries there. So we need to know when something's going to hit this, where its edges are. And in fact, you can have the edges being smaller than the actual appearance or bigger than the actual appearance. So we're going to add one more thing. Now I'm going to go back to my floor, and I am going to add another node, and this is a collision shape, which you've probably, again, if you did last year, you'll remember this. Otherwise, basically, this is the hitbox, the area where one object knows that it's hit another object. So I'm going to add that to the floor. You'll see that error goes away, and we come up with another error, which it says, oh, I need a shape. So very similar to the other one. In this case, it doesn't know what shape it should be. I would like to be a cube, or in this case, what we call a box shape, so it matches the other one. And you can see here, if I'm going to just hide this one. There's a nice little error eyeball here, so you can toggle visibility on something. I'm going to hide the mesh. I'm going to hide that floor. And you can see that the collision shape, this blue thing, is the size of that it used to be. It's a tiny little 1x1 area here. And so that means if I were to run this game and one thing were to hit this floor, the only place it would be able to stand as a solid would be right on top there. If it went over here, it would fall right through. Now, this could be also used to your advantage in certain games of where you would have like a little hidden or trick floor where you'd fall through it. But in this case, I want my floor collision shape to be the same size as my actual floor object. So I'm going to click on that and go to that transform. And you can see here I have the same kind of transform options. I could try and scale or move this manually, but way easier. I already know the other one's 10 by 10, so I'm going to make this just 10. And you can see it's that little blue line outline comes up there by 10, so that now the appearance of my floor matches where the actual solid floor is. And we are good. Now, got to be careful when you are moving things. Notice I can actually move the collision shape off of the floor. So now actually the solid area would be right here, even though it looked like it was here. Again, this could be used for cool features later on, but in general, we don't want to do this. So you can solve the problem by clicking on the parent. And notice how these are indented, a lot like the Python code we would have learned. That means these are part of this floor. So the floor is what we call the parent. These are children or child nodes of the floor. And when the parent moves, the children move with it. But the children can move independently of the parents. This is often a problem we run into. You can solve it a couple ways by either just making sure you always move them, or using this little button up here. We also would have learned in the grade 10 called my colleague Mr. Borman calls this the glue together button. It says make sure the object's children are not selectable. Essentially, it means you can't pick these individually and move them. So I'm going to click that glue together button. And now if I pick that one, I can manually pick it, but if I click on it, it doesn't allow me to pick them individually. So we are pretty close to our first thing. Now, this is a pretty boring game. As you can imagine, it's going to be a floor and not very exciting, but let's run it and see if we can actually have our first game here. Now, to play this scene, it's first of all not saved, so we probably want to save that scene. I'm going to click Save Scene, and it's going to save it in the folder where I made this game. And notice it smartly grabs the name of the root node and calls that a level 1 scene. So remember, a scene is like a collection of nodes that together. So level 1 can be made up of a whole bunch of things. I'm just going to save them all together here, and you'll see it also appears down below in my little file browser. Now, if I run this scene, this is to play the game. I'm going to hit play there, and you may get a little pop-up here which says a firewall. Just allow that. That is totally fine. We're going to get our game, and I don't see anything. And I would expect to see a floor here, which is a problem. However, and if you did this grade 10, if you worked through this as far as the 2D games, you should expect to see whatever you see on the screen. So this is a little bit of a disappointment. There is one more thing that we need in the 3D world that we didn't need in the previous work, which is a way of looking at this. Because it's 3D, we don't always look at it in a particular orientation. We don't look at it top down or side here. We can actually look at any angle of our 3D world when we're playing our game, and we need to let Godot know what that is. So I've got one more thing I need to add to level 1, and that is a camera. A camera is how we look at and the angle we look at our game in a 3D world. So I'm going to click on Add Child Node here, and I'm just going to type a camera. And we've got a bunch of cameras here. I just want to use this first one, camera here. And it's probably going to add it right into the middle of my scene, buried inside of that. So I'm with the camera selected, I'm just going to move it up here. And you can see there, there is my little camera object, and it's got this purple little thing basically showing what it's pointing at. Think of you as being the orange thing, and you're looking in the angle of the camera here. So I would like to, if I played it right now, I'd be looking out into space. So I'm going to pull the camera back a little bit using that transform control. I might want to move it up here. I may want to rotate it down. And if you get in close, you'll be able to see kind of what you're looking at. This can be a little confusing because you hope that you're looking at the right thing, but I'm not sure. And nicely, we have a little button that helps us check this right here. This is the preview, and that will show us what, as if we're looking through the camera. So that actually looks pretty good right now. So I can see that. Maybe I want to move back a little bit here, and I get a good view of my entire tabletop. Again, you get to pick exactly where you want it. Maybe you wanted to have a little higher view and looking more straight down, depending on the game that you're designing. If we were to play this right now, it may or may not work. I'm not sure. We could test it out, but you can actually have multiple cameras. If you think of games like Mario Kart or something where you had a multiplayer game, so each person gets to look at a different view of the level. Or you can switch cameras if you want to have like a first-person view or a top-down view or that kind of thing. So you need to make sure that this is actually the camera that we're using, and there's a little checkbox here in the inspector called on, and under current, basically saying this is the camera I want to use. And if we play our game right now, after a half an hour, you will find that you have a tabletop. One of the most boring games imaginable, but we're going to start adding a bunch of things to this in our next couple lessons to make this a lot more interesting. So just as a recap here, Godot Game Engine is a very powerful tool where we're going to build our games. Essentially, it is made up of a whole bunch of nodes. These nodes are different programming structures that have been built for you to do common things. Notice a camera. You having to program your own camera would take a long time, and you are going to want to use them for your 3D games. Objects like this static body is a thing that sits there that doesn't move and is great if you wanted to build walls, floors, bumpers, objects that you needed to crash into. And in this case, we've also got like a graphic. A 3D graphic is already built for you. You don't have to program or design your own one, and a collision shape so that we know when one object hits another. We've built these together and we've saved them as a scene. A scene is a collection of nodes. Later on, we're going to learn a lot more nodes that we can add, as well as code that we can put onto these nodes to make them do different things. I am just going to save my scene here, and we will see you next lesson for adding some more things to our tabletop to make this an interesting game.